is capital improvement program 24 to 28. James, I'm assuming you want to take that one.
So I gave out two documents this evening. The first is the proposed budget calendar for this year. One of the things that we're going to try and do is complete, barring any developments or anything that may require us to do otherwise. We're going to try and get all of our expected business done by December 6th to avoid us from having to have, if not needed, the December 20th meeting right up before the Christmas holiday. So with all luck, we won't have to have a December 20th meeting, which is what we aimed for last year, but we weren't able to do that. But I also put together a calendar that I've already shared with the staff and want to share with you tonight after we have our conversation about capital improvement requests. This outlines what we are shooting for the dates for both internally for the staff to get budget requests in and to process requests, and then also for the administration to get drafts out to the board. You'll also notice here that there is a date, or we say board capital improvement request, because that's your homework after we have this conversation tonight about any specific request you may have that will, of course, require the staff to do some estimating and some homework on to try to drill down on what possible costs would be. I've had many conversations with a number of you. I know Keith and I have had several conversations about some specific requests which staff are currently exploring and getting pricing on. But essentially what we'd like is once we get to a point where we think we have some specific capital improvements that might be requested by the board, we'll get some data and some round figure pricing from staff, and then we will work that into a 5-year capital improvement budget. We're right now at the end of a 3-year capital improvement budget. From what I can tell, at least according to the last capital improvement budget, that was the inaugural one. So I don't know that we've ever had one prior to the one we are in now. I'm used to working with a 5-year capital improvement budget, and because I think we have a lot of things that we already have identified as probably needs, I think we have enough data and enough projects to go out 5 years, so why not? So that's what we're aiming for, is to go out 5 years. And some of these, which I'll talk about tonight, include like irrigation for the ball fields. We're looking at replacing already the detention pond, which I'll explain later, that services our athletic fields, and that we're going to tie into a possible expansion of our public works yard, so to speak. Right now, we don't have a yard, we just have a parking lot there, but we'd like to take the pond, the detention basin, and turn that into a graveled area where we can store some items and move the basin over, which I'll explain here in a little bit. So as we work through those items with capital improvements, the staff is also working through internally what requests we will have for our budget. Now, the capital, especially for those who are new, the capital improvement program is not an allocation of funds. It is a planning document that helps us prioritize and forecast what we're looking to spend on large scale capital improvements over the next 5 years. That can always change. Everything is subject to appropriation. The budget itself is the only thing that actually is an appropriation. You'll see when we talk about this evening that there are a number of things we did and there's a number of things we didn't do in the capital improvement program for various reasons. Some of that was before, well, all of it was before I got here. But we'll talk a little bit about that. Some of the things that are still remaining that we may want to continue and carry over, or just drop them altogether because we have potentially other priorities going forward. So ideally, what we would like is the next couple of weeks to have ideas, broad ideas from you about things that the staff can look into as far as potential budget, capital improvement budget requests. And then we hope to have the draft program to you by October the 11th for the board. And then between that meeting and the 18th, which is our second board meeting in October, we can work through offline more or less anything that needs to be tweaked. But then we can have our actual work session and first reading on the 18th. Obviously, anything that we put in for 2024 on the capital improvement budget, we'll mirror that onto the December, not the December, but the 2024 fiscal year budget as an allocation. So as we're doing that, we'll also be seeing the first reading coming up, or rather the draft, and then eventual first reading, but the draft of the actual budget. It's important for us to have an idea of where we're going to be at on the capital improvements before we do the budget, so that we know what to budget for capital improvements next year. So as we're finishing up the capital improvement budget on November 1st, I will be giving you a draft budget, an actual budget for the fiscal year of 2024. You'll have a couple weeks to look at it, and we'll have our work session, public hearing, and first reading on November the 15th. I don't foresee, hopefully if we're doing our job correctly and we're having good dialogue about this, I don't foresee really any material changes between that and the second reading. But as is always customary, we try to update numbers that might be changed if for whatever reason revenue forecasts change, or we always have to include our year-to-date numbers. Those will inevitably change, and so we'll try to update those as near as possible to the December 6th date, and hopefully then have an idea of where we will generally be at the end of that fiscal year, the end of this fiscal year. So is there any questions about the proposed budgetary timeline? Any concerns? Awesome.
I'll give it kudos, I think it was the past 2 years thereabouts, we had some complaints from the Board of Aldermen about doing this the very last meeting, ratifying this the last meeting of the year, and feeling like we got started. This looks like an awesome response to that concern, so I appreciate the work that you put in and standardizing this. This is great.
Especially like the visibility and input in the process, going over a couple months versus a couple.
Yeah, very good stuff.
And I also like the 5-year.
So
Next item, or you want to?
no, this is all still the.
Food trucks is next. So we have more on this.
No, this is all, we've yet to begun really it's the conversation.
Oh, okay.
So that was just the timeline. Now let's look at, you can see here from our previous capital improvement plan, there are two categories here, 2 pages. One that talks about improvement priorities from the mayor and the Board of Aldermen, and the other from the staff. Now, I've had our staff working on this for a few weeks now. Well, some of us have been working on it for some time. You know, our public works staff and I and our park staff have talked about what their wish list is. They've been drilling down, and I've already gotten a number of estimates from them, but they've been drilling down on what these wish lists may actually cost us. So we're in the midst already of kind of getting an idea of what staff's capital improvement priorities would be. What I would like, and I thought this would be helpful to just see the things that we've talked about over the last several years as far as priorities. Now, as you go through this, you'll notice that there's a number of these things that we have already done. I'd say more than half, some of which are still in process or in progress, so to speak. Things like Weldon Spring Road. We've obviously been making those grant applications in the past. This year we went actually for the post road improvements, which were on the current capital improvement program budget. But we're actually just now getting to a point where that's being approved. So now we're going to have to push that out onto this next 5-year program budget. You'll see that there was the trail replacement on Henning Road. That's something that we just recently went through, so we know that we've made that TAP grant. We don't know if we've got it yet, but obviously we're going to budget like we're going to get it. Just like everything else that might have to get pushed back. If we don't get it this year, we might push it back. We upgraded our server. We did do the street sign replacements throughout the neighborhoods. We're still in that process, but we're almost completed with that. So there's a number of these things which we've already done. However, like obviously we've done, and this also was done before we went on this massive slab replacement program, which we've done as well. So this is really just for your perusal to see what things, and I don't expect this all tonight, because I really like you to kind of digest some of these projects that we've had. You might have something tonight that if you've got something tonight in mind, I know a few of you have, and that's why I've already gotten some of that information from you. But if there are things that they're on this list or not on this list, we'd like to hear about them. I do have the list of the actual program that we went through, and I was going to go through, just because there's not a lot, but I was going to go through them real quick with you and tell you what we were able to complete and what we were not able to complete over the last 3 years. And these are broken down into different categories such as IT, parks, stormwater, public works projects. The document itself is 45 pages long. I didn't want to print out 450 pages for you guys, but I know we have a digital copy posted online, and if you don't have one, I will send you out another copy so you can look through the old copy. But of all the priorities, what was chosen last time, first for an IT was video conferencing at City Hall, which we did improve the video conferencing, and that's what the conference room that we oftentimes retreat to in there. That was budgeted for, and that was completed. That improvement was done. I believe that was done with the original, not ARPA money, but what was the precursor to ARPA?
I think that was
Was it the CARES Act? Yeah, was it the
No.
was it the CARES Act?
I thought that was the reimbursement we got because we found the that billing or something that you had covered. Maybe it wasn't.
I don't care. That's.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all
So-
that matters.
So the project that we did identify was the video conferencing capability. Now, ironically, we didn't put on the capital improvement plan server replacement, but we did budget for that a couple years ago, and we did do that. So the server was done, and the video conferencing capabilities at City Hall was done. As far as Parks and Recreation, we had a complete replacement of the Barrett Haven Trail, which over the course of 3 years was slated to be $560,000. They intended to replace the trail with concrete trail. We did not do that. I know why I wouldn't do it, but I don't know why the board didn't necessarily do it. It seems like a lot of money for what could be a better maintained trail. But at the time, we thought that was going to run in about the $560,000 range. Of course, we also did build the Garden Prairie Athletic Complex. And so we do know, because there are certificates of participation or COPs or more or less bonds have been issued for the financing of that project. We know that that's $250,000. It's going to be going on for at least the next 12 more years. That will come out of capital improvement. We also know the Henning Road trail replacement, as I mentioned earlier, that was budgeted for. It didn't happen in the time frame that this current capital improvement program budgeted for, but we are expecting to do that. Tom, I hate to put you on the spot, but what were we thinking that this is going to cost us if we get the grant, the TAP grant?
We upped our share
Right.
to get more points, if you recall. I want to say it was about like 250 or so, 300,000, somewhere in that range there, without having the exact.
Okay.
Also, we should know, according to Jason Lang, we should know something one way or the other in the first or second week of October.
Oh, okay. Well, that'll give us a better idea of where to put that in the budget. Year 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or 5. So those are kind of the parks projects that we did and we did not do. I can tell you that right now,
Skid steer?
so the skid steer was purchased. I think we had that. We paid it out of parks when we.
Just possible ones off my list.
Nope, we did do the
Okay,
skid
sorry.
steer. But while we're on the subject of parks, we are looking at probably a replacement. We're pricing out right now replacement of the playground surface. The equipment itself seems to be in pretty good shape. We had a couple jerk kids who melted a buffalo or an elephant or some item up there, but we replaced it. But in general, the equipment seems to be in pretty good shape, but we are looking at possibly a complete replacement of the playing surface. And we're also, as I mentioned, looking at the athletic complex in general. The current detention basin that was designed to be a bio basin. So permeable membrane where the water detains in that space and then seeps, I guess, into the groundwater, some fashion. During the construction of that project, and who's the fault at this? I mean, I'm sure there's many, but they're all gone from here. That proper filtration protections were not put into place and sometimes failed, got into the storm drains, got into that basin. And we've had people out to look at it and it's essentially silted in, which ruins the actual bio membrane. It keeps it from operating the way it's designed to operate. Now, it hasn't been a flood problem. That hasn't been the case. There's an outfall structure, there's overflow, so it just operates like a regular basin. Which isn't necessarily a problem, but when we had our DNR audit, luckily nobody stopped to ask, is this supposed to be a bio basin? Because it doesn't look like it's working. They just said, okay. But one of the ideas that we've had is to potentially rebuild it and move it further onto Chris Wilmus's property. And turn that area into just a rocked and graveled area. One of the issues that we did have with our DNR inspection was we don't have any washout areas that don't go into the bio basin, which washing out and going into the bio basin, especially mud and rock, would be bad. We're already running out of space to put our trailers and other things over there. I mean, barely can park staff there and park our equipment. And we need additional outdoor storage for some of the things that we are doing. So having a rock area where we could wash off our vehicles, having a rock area where we could wash off dirt, other things that doesn't go into our storm sewer system, that doesn't go into a detention pond, which would then cause it to fail if it's operating as a bio basin. It would give us that extra space and we would rebuild that pond correctly, or rather not pond, but basin correctly and maintaining it correctly from now on. So we don't have this issue. We're still talking about what that would look like cost wise. I know the homeowner, Mr. Wilmus, has been very receptive to the idea. In fact, he's been supportive of it. So that's one large one I think we'll see proposed, if not in the next year or two, in the next 5. And then, as I mentioned earlier at the outset of the conversation, irrigation for the fields. I know that wasn't done as a cost-saving measure. The pipes were laid in such a fashion that there is capacity to do irrigation, which was at least forethought, and that's good that that was the case. That saves us some money. But we have put a considerable amount of effort into aeration, seeding, and fertilizing, and weed control. And we had a real rough drought this summer, and I had the guys go buy sprinklers. A lot of money in hoses to drag them all around that place to save grass so we weren't playing in a desert. And we should really just have irrigation. I don't know how many more of these kind of summers we'll have, but we should have the best fields around. And right now they're pretty crinkly and dry come July. So that's also another parks
Are you including them putting like like a big head to hook up a hose to wet the infield. So
there's only one of those. Yeah, there's already a Canon. I don't know that they
They use it.
use it, but that is something that, we do have. I'm not sure why they went through all that and they don't use it,
I know
but
that durage material, it's kind of important to keep it.
yeah.
You don't. Good at the right level of moisture, otherwise you might as well play playing on concrete.
Right. So that's an issue that I've made sure to remind the guys that they need to make sure that they're doing that as well before they're prepping the field. It's not good enough to just drag it. They need to wet it and drag it. So.
On the subject of the ball diamonds, specifically, I know we've talked about earlier this year, but this seems like a good opportunity. Hold in some sort of a safety net, for the foul balls based on proximity of our limited parking there and the fact that those foul balls have no blocking other than that chain link fence right there in the backdrop. I think that's something I mean, personally, I had a pretty good sized net in my vehicle and a few times I parked here, so I'm quite certain there's any other people that have.
So Nicole did find a vendor and a product for that. So I know she was getting pricing today on installation. So that's been on the radar. That's something that we've been researching, but I think we should have numbers hopefully here in the next week. So we'll have something to kind of chew on as far as how much the cost is going to be and prioritizing that.
Awesome.
So, and moving on to public works projects, we did complete this street sign replacements, or at least we purchased them. This year they'll have the third, I believe it's this year is the third and final round of street signs throughout our neighborhoods. We also did do, you might, if you were to be looking at the the current CIP, we had in there about a $1.4 million a year for 21, 22, 23 to do street slabs and replacement and street repairs. We've done significant amount more than that, but we will be reevaluating kind of where we're at, where we think we need to be putting in as far as, you know, that's kind of a gimme, like that's obviously going to be here. Where we think we need to be the next 5 years. We said probably $1 million, maybe 1.2. So we'll certainly be including that again. And even though we did do it, that's kind of a perpetual maintenance issue going forward. And then lastly, on the public works projects, we did have just a general kind of placeholder, $50,000 a year for ADA compliance throughout the city, which we have not had a specific program since Luke left focused on ADA compliance, though we have been focused on making sure that we are making repairs and other things necessary. I know we're working on some sidewalk projects now, but making sure that we do remain ADA compliance when we have like heaved sidewalk streets, curbs that might have been busted or are not compliant. We're trying to fix those as we get them. So we'll probably keep that as a line item, even if it's just a placeholder, in part because it also is important to show that we are recognizing that. If anybody ever comes and says, are you doing anything about ADA? Yes, we are. Next, we did some of the stormwater projects we had. We had a project identified a few years ago for some drainage improvements on Bluebird Meadows at the Bluebird Meadow Park. I don't foresee us going back to that. I went back and looked at some of Luke's files. It was never budgeted for, and I presume it wasn't budgeted for because I don't know that it's really been that big of a problem. I've not seen or heard from either our guys or from constituents that there's some sort of a drainage issue. I mean, I see where the drainage issue supposedly is holding water, but I don't know that it's created a problem requiring $50,000 to fix. So Bluebird Meadow is the park, yeah, right across from there.
I mean, the only place that I've seen they're really kind of drainage, I don't know if call it drainage. There's a couple pockets around the edges of the lacrosse field. But you know, it's got to rain quite a bit, and you know, I think you're naturally going to have that. It wasn't designed to, as far as it wasn't designed to be like an athletic field.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, it was a sod farm and then I
Yeah.
think they just cut the grass.
Right.
It's like,
So there's definitely pockets, but I mean, it's,
I had this when this was going on, I thought this was related to, there were some drainage issues under the bridge. That's
Yeah.
where it was.
that's
And I
the,
thought they did some stuff.
no, there's no, I mean, I can attest that I go running and biking down there and it floods, that gets it to be a muddy, wet mess down there. So, and I don't think you're gonna fix it because you can't control how high that creek comes.
So there were problems.
There was
with,
big problems.
with the creek. The creek would stay in its banks, but I thought I remember they were having issues with
It was,
water runoff coming from.
it was when the culverts, they upsized the culvert, because every time a dead animal or something got in there, it would clog up and it
Yeah.
just flood the entire area. But that was,
It was so
long
on
time ago.
the.
Oh.
Not on the creek side of the sidewalk or path or whatever, but
On the other side.
culvert that would, going down on the other side would back up and create a mess and come down.
Okay.
And I
that was
thought they were, and I
4
thought
years
that's what that was related to.
So there's a couple of things, you know, while we're on the subject of that. So there's definitely in the ravine underneath the bridge on Henning. That gets to the point where like if you're on a bike and it rains and then water subsides, it's muddy silt sits there and it's like you gotta slow down. It's wet and slick and it's frankly, it can be kind of dangerous. But that's, you know, I don't know, that's just if you just take note when it floods and go out there and clean it off for safety purposes. Just an observation while we're talking about that. The other piece is that from the lake, and just for the awareness of the board and this, there's been a couple fish that have been caught out of there that are those invasive, I believe they're called like the Chinese grass carp, and they've come from the creek, and when the creek floods into the lake has now become populated with those, and they can't rebreed in there, but at the same time, they're pretty. It can damage the ecosystem pretty badly. Fish and all other kinds. So, or I guess the stuff that the smaller fish eat. So, kind of separate with the flooding issue there, there are that grass carp, basic grass carp within our lake there. Something I wanted to bring up, and it's time is ended.
know any bow fishermen we can get out there?
Well,
To clean that water out a little bit.
yeah, no, we, a couple people in the neighborhood talked to the, Missouri Department of Conservation. They don't really have anything, just kind of like, okay, noted. I don't know if there's any real way to mitigate it, but I would say, I don't know who's responsible for stocking that lake either. If there's an annual restocking program that we have for it, it's a lot of people come out there to fish. It's a, you know, which I think it's a nice option to have for folks to come in there, but something that, you know, we talk about that offline, but I just kind of wanted to make everybody aware that there are these.
I can give you a recipe for a good dough bait. Kids out there. So I kind of like a $5 bounty for each one they pull out.
So my understanding is that the invasive ones, like the jumping ones, that they're some sort of filter feeders. I don't know that there's much that you can catch them other than snagging.
Yeah, that's
I
kind
think
of,
they can
yeah,
like snag
right.
right.
What's another type of?
Yeah,
Oh, you
Jane-
can regular
Oh,
carp.
there's another one that's
Yeah, snag 'em or,
Oh, invasive.
invasive now or
I think they should just allow.
problem child. And I, the whole thing where they say they won't reproduce in lakes. I'm not buying. If the lake is big enough, I'm
Yeah.
buying it then out.
you may want to check into, there's a low voltage electricity version of getting rid of those, and I've watched some videos on it. But might be able to contact conservation department. I don't know if Missouri Conservation is doing it, but other conservation departments are doing. They have these John boats with booms that have an electric charge,
Mhm.
and they basically float to the top and they scoop them up. Get
Yeah.
rid of them.
I'm guessing that's pretty broad spectrum and not selective, isn't it?
Yeah, it didn't look like it from what I saw that it was killing everything.
No, it doesn't kill the fish. It
Just
stuns them.
Yeah.
It stuns them, so the
Right.
rest of them are fine.
Right.
As long as
They
you.
float to the surface and then you scoop them up, the ones that you want out and get them
Okay,
out.
leave the other ones. Makes
Yeah,
sense.
to your
Is it-
point, it's a low voltage. If you put too much electricity, it'll snap the spine of the fish. So that's why
Yeah.
it's very. Have to
The
be.
videos I've seen are pretty interesting on how they do it.
At the same time, it's a good way to find out what fish you do.
Yeah.
There's a frequent, there's a
It's not like
frequency that-
soldiers fishing with him.
there's a frequency. If we used to take our boat up on the Mississippi, you hit the right idle sound, like going through a slough, they just start, I mean, hundreds of them just start jumping. There's like a certain frequency. If you could hit it, every little fish in that lake will jump. And then you can just stand there with a.
James, may I ask about, since you're talking about stormwater, I would like to at least mention that erosion along town square is not getting better.
Okay, that's good.
And we do need to look at that. We've got some utilities that are being exposed and.
That on the back side by 364.
No,
uh,
it's right behind Casey's house.
Yeah, it's west of Casey's house along that channel that's on the north side of Town Square Boulevard.
Right before the culvert that goes.
Correct.
And,
Pretty, it's been talked about. We've met. There's some minimal things could be done without going through a full land disturbance permit through the DNR. But I think we need to at least look at doing some of the worst sections with some riprap or some fill. There has been some preliminary numbers thrown around in the last year and a half.
Can we just get M&H to dump there?
Well,
just don't tell DNR.
Comes the word.
So,
I don't know.
one of the things about Bluebird Meadow also, and this is really a parks, but park stormwater comes out the same fund. But one of the issues that, has been a perennial conversation is dealing with the cricket pitch over there behind the Culinary Institute at, Community College near Barrett Haven. Because we've had problems with, at first it was problems with them using the bathroom, so we bought them a bathroom trailer and publicly using the restroom. They still prefer the woods to trailer or a Johnny on the spot, but the real problem is parking for those patrons and trash. We
Yeah.
continue to hear the complaint that they're parking on the lot up there, which is where else are they gonna park? Well, they could park in our subdivision, which would get other concerns or other problems.
Yeah, that would be appreciated. For your residents of Barrett Haven, I can tell you that.
Yeah, and then the litter, unfortunately, that they've been leaving. So a conversation that the mayor and I have consistently had with GRG, and we have a summit with GRG coming up here in November. We intend to push the issue of allowing, making a swap, essentially allowing GRG to use those fields as prairie, as natural prairie grasses, such as they are through most of Bluebird Meadow Park, but then removing some of the prairie at Bluebird Meadow and moving cricket pitches over there. If we do that, we will probably look at also, if we're able to do this, which we need to, because really creating friction between the school and us and neighbors. So, but if we do that, we would probably also look at then an improvement to the parking lot and just a greater improvement to Bird Meadow. To try to keep, we would still have the trail around there. We wouldn't be taking the whole thing. We would just be taking essentially like another field size, which would leave tons of lands.
Well, so over in Ward 3, one of the things I've heard consistently from a lot of the residents over there is, so we've got this green space, we've got, the green area behind the Culinary Institute that's nice and well maintained. And we've got Bluebird Meadow that's another nice, well maintained area. But I think that in Barrett Haven, I know specifically around 2020, when I moved out here with my family, there was a turnover, and there are a lot more folks out there in the neighborhood now that have younger kids. There's a lot more, moms looking for parks and stuff, to places that can go and walk to and enjoy the community. And it's nice to go along the trail, but we have an influx of young families. People are looking for playgrounds. What I've heard through many residents, and I think we may have had a discussion briefly on this before, but it's just, there's spaces over there, but no playgrounds, not even a small, low threshold, couple swings and a slide playground where people can kind of get together and bring the kids out and burn some energy off. So as we look to who GRG, I would assume are probably residents of Darden Prairie by and large. For them to kind of have all these spaces over around our community. And kind of, I wouldn't say catering to them, but helping them. I would ask to look to also find ways that if we're gonna do that, we also find ways to find ways we can bring utilization up for our residents over in Ward 3. And I think, looking at kind of repurposing them into a local small playgrounds or something like that might be a good option. It's something that's been on my mind and I've been hearing it a lot since over last year or two. Hear that.
That's a good idea. We'll have to have a conversation with GRG. I don't know the specifics of what, so that's their land. We don't own it. That's
Was that
all,
the cricket club? I
all
thought
of
we
that.
leased it.
we lease it. No, we lease the land from GRG.
Great River.
And then we lease it to the. cricket
Oh,
club,
okay.
too.
And then,
Oh,
and then
so we leased it to cricket.
we don't really lease it to them. They paid for the pitch and we said, you can use as much as you want. If you want,
Yeah.
if you want to build that there, go for it. And we'll let you go nuts on it, which they do. And then making a mess.
Okay, I thought GRG was a cricket club. So,
No, that's Great River Speedway. So that whole thing is owned by
Yeah.
them technically, but we maintain it, operate it and lease it from them.
so
So there are some encumbrances that, there are some things we can't, covenants we can't do. I don't know what those are, but we have active conversation with them. And if that's something that is a push of the of Barrett Haven, I think that's something we need to try to explore. And what that looks like ultimately, if they say yes, it'll probably be a conversation as far as I don't know if GRG would be like, is how it looks, I'm sure is how they may say yes or no to it, but we'll have to probably come up with something that's going to be amenable to what they like to.
yeah, well, the
Big playgrounds, they're probably not gonna be down with. We had like playable structures that were more like natural or.
yeah,
And I honestly, I just came back from Kentucky back in August and there's an amazing natural park called the Bernheim Arboretum. And they have a giant playground made out of, it's all natural looking. It's all trees and tree houses and playable structures. Not really tree houses, but it's all playable structures, but it looks like the forest.
I agree. Let's
So-
build an arboretum
We should.
there.
But I mean, something like that, they might say yes to. I have a feeling if we said we're gonna build a bunch of like jungle gyms and stuff, they'd be like, that's not how we roll.
Yeah.
Generally speaking, I like the idea of it because it's like, hey, we got City Hall Park, it's great, but there's really nothing on
On
the
that
south
town.
side of the city,
Yeah.
the south side of town. That,
Yeah.
don't get me
Absolutely.
wrong, plenty of residents from that side will drive up to City Hall Park because it's nice and it's close, but not exactly. close.
Sometimes it's easier just to take the stroller and go down to the park rather than get the kids in the car, drive them over here, and then you gotta, deal with leaving.
Or just drive to John Milton and then-
Just one
Good
thing,
point.
one thing in the conversation we'll have to remember is, once we do that, it won't just be Barrett Haven residents wanting to go there. They'll be driving to
No,
other places to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's expected.
Yeah.
Bear Haven or Bluebird Meadow, though, I did see in the Green River Greenway that GRG, so I didn't put the acronym together until now. I did see the Green River Greenway had indicated that the 5-leg kayaking, Blue River.
The blue, they're
Blue
talking a blue way, yeah.
Blue Way is gonna actually, at the end of it in a couple of years, start right here in Darden Prairie. So however I would imagine that they're gonna start to look at how they develop and improve Bluebird Meadow, and we can get ahead of that. And kind of work with them and help leverage some of their funding in that space as well to have a nice, if they do see that they're gonna have kayaks and, develop that to some extent, if we could work with them, that I think that would be a good opportunity if they're agreeable.
We
Yeah,
did that.
That was gonna be the next thing that I brought up, because as I've heard about that, I sought out information on the Blue Way and what they're going to do, because I keep hearing it's gonna end at Bluebird Meadow.
It's actually starting in Bluebird
Again,
Meadow.
technically. Yeah, because it'd start there.
It's not the headwaters would be there. It's gonna go all the way.
It'll be where you put in.
You can always,
Does it go south to north?
hey, if you're the kind of guy that likes to paddle upstream, go for it.
I thought the river went north south and it started up at 370. Does it go?
No, it's zigzags.
It goes all the way to Mississippi. So,
All right, so
Or I guess-
I'm
yeah.
directionally challenged, but either way, putting in or taking out, my expectation for the usage they would want to see there is that they would be coming to us and saying, hey, we need to expand the parking lot. We need to take over some of that maintained mobile area.
So you might recall, it's been a couple of years. When I first got here, they had started, and we actually, this body already had, gave its tacit approval to being the headwaters. We signed on to a grant proposal, which they did not get. St. Charles County was going to, they've already done an evaluation from Bluebird all the way down to Garden Slough in the Mississippi.
Yeah.
And they didn't get the grant, but basically from Bluebird to Bernard Center, somewhere down there, there's a lot of obstructions. And so they had asked us, hey, you guys, will you sign on to this grant? We said, sure. And then the grant was supposed to help them clear all that. They didn't get it. Then they asked, hey, are you guys going to build a, just even a basic access, which we said, sure, but right now you can't go anywhere. So we're, to that point, we're kind of in a holding pattern. You can float 500 yards before you hit a couple trees and they get stuck. And so until I think they open that up, and St. Charles County is still on their agenda. We've got several, and that's a good point. We should make sure that that's in the CIP. We've got several kind of, I don't call them a boat ramp, but accesses that we kind of are looking at we could do. They're very basic, but we could also build a much larger trailhead there if we like for the waterway. We kind of looked at maybe doing something under the bridge. It needs to be on the south, actually the north side of that pipe that goes across that heading, unless anybody wants to limbo underneath that. But we're looking at probably under the bridge, maybe a spot where they can have a rest area. You don't have to build a pavilion, you can just be under the bridge. Then we'd probably have the access right there under the bridge. But right now, that's just gonna be waiting to see what St. Charles County, they gotta clean up that creek first. Yeah.
The local kayak clubs go out with chainsaws.
There's a lot of that kind of stuff going on right now. It's all volunteer work to clean that stuff out.
Sounds like Mike's gonna go canoe work.
As long as I could just sleep the entire time. I'm not going upstream. I'm glad you saved me from that.
So
Yeah,
Really,
so-
that's just, I drop you off in St. Charles and you're like, I'll see you back in Garden Prairie.
Wait a minute.
That's a real
Bluebird
concern.
Meadow.
Mike's like, man, where the hell is everybody else going?
Why is this river getting so big?
Well, actually, the first thing I thought whenever I heard they were going to do that is there enough water around Bluebird Meadow to put a kayak in and move, or you just shooting?
Oh, it's keeping them.
Is it?
As long as you get the trees out.
Okay.
So,
Well, we are
So
at 45. We do.
Yeah.
Or 48. Do we have anything else?
very quick, last couple of things. So the last things are transportation projects. I kind of already went over. We obviously are doing Hanley. We're doing Stump. These were the ones we're doing Post. There was two others on there that you can see when I send out the plan for you, but I don't foresee us actually going forward. There was adding some more off ramps, on ramps on 364, right onto essentially like an outer road from north of the Prairie and west of Cordoba to connect into Hanley Road, so you can get off 364 on Hanley. I don't know that that's worth $1 million, which is what they had budgeted for this, but that was an improvement that they had sought in the past. And then there was the long sought after improvements to I-64 to have some sort of a slip ramp, off ramp, which we'll continue to look at. But I mean, I can tell you just from conversations with Road Board and MoDOT that even if we were able to get something, the plans that have been pursued in the past are just really kind of a non-starter. And they could actually really work against us with some of the development that we might hope to get after the town square visioning process, because we have take technology north of Post and make that one way, which might hinder the development along that corridor, depending on how we decide to develop it, which we're going to go through. We'll go through that in my reporting. So, but we can move on to the food trucks. So this is really a very brief conversation, but it's on here there was some clarification and the staff and I had a conversation today about it, actually, or a couple of our staff. So when we adopted the food truck ordinance several months ago, we have an opportunity to either get a Darden Prairie license or get a Darden Prairie license by virtue of presenting a license from another community here in St. Charles County. But there's also a portion of the ordinance that discusses premises is getting a license or a premise getting a license to host a food truck. Once we read through it, it was my understanding that our goal was not to have, if ICD was going to have food trucks there, we just wanted to make sure that food trucks had their health inspections, were licensed by somebody, that they were doing what they're supposed to do, and we're just monitoring that. But we're not asking ICD every time they have a parish festival to also get a license to allow the food trucks to go there, because that's how it's read, or that's how it's understood to be worded. There was another issue of the food truck license is also requiring for them to identify where they're going to be, locations they're going to be operating. Well, if they're obviously going to operate at multiple different locations throughout the community throughout the year, they're not going to be able to identify all of those up front. So we're probably going to have to come back to make some changes to that ordinance just to clarify a few items. But I wanted to make sure I understood the goal of the board before we presented any language. As far as licensing premises, this whole conversation started because we had some people that wanted to post up a food truck on a spot permanently or semi-permanently. I think that we wanted to regulate.
Yeah.
Hence the premise license, so to speak. That way we can make sure that they're not there 24/7, 365, that they're actually just a mobile food vendor and not somebody who just parked in a parking lot every day. But if somebody wants to park in a parking lot for a week on a special event or a special occasion, that's fine, but that's more of like a parking lot, renting out the space to a vendor, not a private event. Or so is that kind of what you guys remember?
Yeah, the other part though that we discuss is making sure there's some type of health regulation to them, but they're not just serving cockroaches right off the floor. That was one of the big concerns that so some type of way where if they have a license and been, approved another entity in St. Charles County, we just want to see it.
Well,
We just want to know that it's there.
so my understanding of food trucks, for personal reasons, I've looked into this in the past, and my understanding is if you operate a food truck in the state of Missouri, you have to get approval from each county to operate in that county, and that county is that county health department regulates, how you function with that food truck in that county. So I think from the county, so from the city perspective, I would guess that they would have these requirements, and if we would just reinforce that and make sure, so from a commercial side or for commercial perspective, I'm not sure if there's any consideration we want to look at from that, but from a county to county health, for St. Charles County has everybody requires everybody go in and take a class, stand by certain guidelines that the county offers. So
Have their hepatitis shots and things like that.
certain rules, regulations. So they did regulate it pretty heavily.
I think.
Yeah, you have to get
Yeah, there are
inspections
time
and
health
stuff.
permits go and all that.
Yeah, it's almost like it's a mobile restaurant.
And that's all we're trying to do by doing this is making sure that everybody's following the rules as opposed to just assuming when they come to our town that.
We don't want to deter food trucks from coming.
No.
I think they them to get extra paperwork,
Yeah,
pay a
exactly.
fee and all that stuff.
I think the big focus of the conversation is making sure that, hey, you're not going and parking in the middle of a subdivision. Barring being invited invited or hired for an event by that subdivision or somebody that lives in there. You're not going into the subdivision, parking your food truck and be like, hey, here I am, let's do this, right? That's was the primary side of things. So somebody's coming into an event like Parish Days or whatever it is, to now look at that as hired a caterer, whether or not you're paying them or the person that's buying food.
Yeah, that's an excellent point, ensuring that there's language that says, okay, it's okay if you have like, a neighborhood, we've had, in the past, neighborhood, I live in's had functions, Fairhaven, where they've hired food trucks to come in. And then of course, there's the ice cream vendors that go down the streets, we've all, So I think it's important to make sure that we don't rule any of those out either.
And I don't know if we talked about ICD specifically, but I do remember part of the conversation was around subdivisions. As I was thinking of Aberdeen, like, no, we don't want the guy randomly pulling up and parking in the Aberdeen pool parking lot and just saying, hey, this is my home base.
Right.
But if the Aberdeen HOA wants to invite 3 food trucks in because they're gonna do a subdivision party at the pool,
Yeah.
knock yourself out, not mine.
Yeah. I mean, especially if it's on private property and it's not necessarily like commercially accessible versus like town square. Saying like, I own one of the empty lots here. And so,
I don't know, David, Mike, if you guys remember, but I remember the conversation more so about having an enforcement mechanism to go and remove said food trucks from residential areas if they decide to park on city streets than it was about.
Correct. Yeah, that's,
CBs or the HOAs or anything.
right,
Yeah.
yeah. We just wanted to, once we read through that portion, we wanted to make sure that we don't want to make this cumbersome. We're really trying to make this an opportunity for us to educate people, to make sure they're following the rules of the city. We don't want another situation where we have some illegally operating businesses in the community already.
Yeah.
Where somebody's not pulling up and starting a new business by this. But we don't, for one incident or like for one event, somebody's licensed, we don't expect them to get a license or them to notify the city and the host, so to speak, to notify the city. But we'll present some tweaks probably at the next board meeting that just cleans that up and clarifies that. That's it.
I do have, the one thing we talked about. A good chance.
That's. I don't know, there's a lot on my mind. What are we talking about?
Fairhaven lights.
It's not really an agenda item, so I wouldn't. Yeah.
If you're still working on it, I'll leave it on the table for talk about it.
Well, in Tom's, we might want to talk about it another.
Okay.
Tom can address it maybe as or what's commonplace. I know we had internal conversations about it, but. And if there is some statements from the audience during the meeting, I'll be happy to address them. So that's fine. I'll address it then.
yeah, you're just trying to protect Justin's record. That's what's happening. You're adding stuff.
No, I didn't need to do that. Sorry. I'm just trying to get started on time.
There we go. All right.
Do we want to skip down 0.3? Do we need?
Does anyone have anything for the review of the agenda tonight they'd like to talk about? All right.
I could just tell you real briefly, obviously the maintenance agreement, Southland Farms, Lickin House developed it. But Thomas and Sweet is taking over the construction of the houses. Therefore, they're taking over and holding the maintenance escrow for the facilities improvements while that's being built. And then,
Said Thomas and Sweet, is that spelled right?
yeah, it is.
Sure.
Thomas and Suit. I'm sorry, you're right. It is
Good.
Suit, not Sweet.
Good. Just making sure you didn't have-
And then the final-
There, come on.
Then the final plan tonight for the town square apartments. I do want to just apologize up front. Still getting used to the fact that you don't get the paper copies when everybody else gets them. So Mike brought it to my attention today. He's like, I got the ordinance. I didn't get the plan itself. So I sent it out. If you really wanted to look at the plan, I also can put it up on the board if you'd like. I also have some extra paper copies if you want to see them. Nothing's changed in the area plan. As you might recall, final plans are really adding additional details such as, stormwater calcs, the placement of storm sewer facilities, et cetera. Number of buildings, number of units, facade, all that stuff's all the same. It's really the technical aspects and it's more of an administrative approval than making them change anything at this point. So.
And it did pass P and Z unanimously. It's an administrative function, basically. But it didn't pass unanimously, but it should have.
Right.
Some negative.
And then I was like, you remember things different than me, Dave. It didn't pass unanimously after the attorney told him to.
So, it's the only thing, and I don't want to steal your thunder, and you owe Tom some information from ODOT as far as entrance, and there's some other things that I guess we can address when it comes up if we want to, but. But
Nick really wants to beat the, speed.
There ain't no way. Just a real quick clarification, the objection of those that voted not to approve on P and Z, was that their objection? Wasn't all there?
just apartments.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, staff communication, city attorney,
I have nothing.
city engineer,
I'll wait till the meeting.
all right, city administrator,
I'll hold the meeting.
any alderman,
Nothing.
Nothing.
and the mayor has chosen to be very quiet this year.
Who'd you join the work session?
Do you have a second?
Like I keep.
All right, we will
All in
be
favor?
adjourned. Oh.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, now we are adjourned.